So without further ado, I think we're ready to go to share that screen. Hold on a second. A brief introduction of Gordon, because he's too modest to say that. He dabbled in 3D in elementary school, tried to draw stereo pair art and make autostereograms. Nowadays, he makes stereo images and videos from a variety of sources, including his own photos, TV, film, artwork, product reviews, and more.
Well, thank you, John. Yeah, so I wanted to talk today about something I've experimented with for a long time, which is this asymmetrical framing of stereo pairs. But first, let me say that a lot of the techniques I'll talk about here depend on you being able to first align and crop stereo pairs on your own, and not, for example, relying on a program to do that for you. Many of you probably know that terrific program Stereo Photo Maker and the series of apps by Masuji Suto, and that's a terrific program that I use all the time, and I also use the auto align feature in it all the time. But once in a while for uses like this and others, using that auto align basically takes away some opportunities for making artistic choices or judgment calls. So once in a while, I think doing it by hand is of benefit. And by the way, I do have online, I have a little tutorial which is basically about manually cropping and aligning stereo pairs that you can apply to what I'll talk about today. I'll post that in the chat afterwards. Okay, but here we go. Let's see. Okay, so this is an example of an asymmetrically framed stereo pair. For these shots, I'll always have the parallel view on top and cross view on the bottom. And if you can't free view, don't worry, because there'll be an anaglyph in a moment. So as you can see here, if you free view this, the right-hand frame edge is a lot closer than the left here. And I did that in order to match the shape of this picture, right? And I accomplished that by cropping the left and right edges of the stereo independently. What this does is makes the left and right eye images different widths. So as you can see here, the left is quite wider. And that's an obvious problem for format and display compatibilities. For example, with anaglyph and interlaced, you need two equal sized images, of course. So the question is how would you convert this stereo pair to anaglyph? And of course, the easiest way would obviously be to crop the wider image so they're the same width. In other words, just to use traditional formatting. If you did that, you would get this. Of course, it's fine, works as an anaglyph, but of course that asymmetrical framing effect is gone. And furthermore, you also lose some stereo information on the left side of the image. I'll show you what I'm talking about with that in a second. But instead of cropping the wider image to match the narrower one, what if you did the opposite and widens the narrower one? So if you use a black bar to make the narrower image wider, so they're the same total width, you get this. So that bar on the left, you could argue is a slight distraction, but it does preserve, again, that asymmetrical framing. In addition, you don't lose part of the 3D coverage on the left side. Like here, if you look at the small leaves on the far left of the trunk here in stereo, or rather you do see those in stereo, but if you compare the previous version here, you see those same leaves actually only in one eye because they're hidden behind the frame, behind the stereo frame for your other eye. So also notice here that excuse me, that you can't just cut out that bar on the left from this completed anaglyph because it contains information for your left eye. If you look at this without your glasses, you see there's the red information in that bar there.
Good time.
Oh, thank you. Now, if you find this bar on the left too distracting, another solution is you could take the narrower image and stretch it to the same size as the wide one, and you would get this. So this effectively rotates the scene in 3D space. So again, here's the previous one.
Good time.
And here's the stretched. So what this does is rotates the image so the left and right frame edges are at the same level. But of course, this is a pretty major change to the original stereo. It preserves it does preserve the stereo information on the left side, and there's no distracting bar. But you know, you could argue that it destroys the interesting framing from before. Okay, now I often make zoom in stereo videos to explore the details in photos, and here's an example of that. This is cross view with the asymmetrical framing. And again, I'll have the other formats in a second, but here is what that looks like.
Want the tea on the toilet seat? I gotta get it over my ass. Yo, tea. Except the toilet seat.
And so again, of course, the left and right are different sizes here. Does anyone want to see this in parallel? Can someone monitoring the chat tell me if anyone requests this in parallel? Otherwise, I'll skip to the anaglyph here.
Parallel, yes, please.
Yes, show
Oh,
it.
yes, yeah, please.
Okay. All right, here is the parallel. I know it's a bit wide for me to view this in parallel at this resolution, but of course you can resize your zoom window. All right, so here's the same video, but as anaglyph using that black bar method. And by the way, this is not merely the same as enlarging a still anaglyph, like if you pinched and zoomed on the image, like on your phone. If you did that for one thing, the black bar on the left, you would lose that immediately. And then also the stereo window would stay at the same level throughout. So in other words, when you were all the way zoomed in, things would look very far away or deep within the window. But here I'm actually moving the stereo frame deeper into the picture as you go. So if you look at this without your glasses, you'll actually see the red and cyan layers moving relative to one another. And that's what accomplishes that zoom depth. And to compare, here is that same anaglyph video, but with the stretching and rotational method. So there's no black bar here, but again, you could say it's a different experience than the original. Here is another example, first as stereo pairs. And again, here the right edge is closer than the left in 3D, as you can see. And here's the anaglyph version of that using the black bar method.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And by the way, this one here is an optimized anaglyph, and the previous ones were the Dubois method. And again, to compare, here's using the stretch method with this picture. So you can see it's rotated, slightly here. Again, here's the black bar. Here's the stretched. So you might prefer one or the other, but you have those options. All right, here's an example. If you'll forgive the self-indulgence here, this was just something I had handy. Here's an example where asymmetrical framing can be a practical solution to stereo problems. So if you can free view this, you'll notice that my selfie taking extended arm on the right is a lot closer than anything else in the picture. And in order to avoid making that a window violation, and if you don't know what that is, it's basically when something cuts across the frame. Looks like a physical impossibility, right? But in order to avoid that, I had to place the right edge of the stereo basically on the same level, on that same very near to the viewer level. However, if I had just made the left edge match that same level, which would look like this, then if you notice, for example, without fusing, you'll see that part of my hand and part of this so-called trombone chino squash, which I love. It's more like a French horn squash, perhaps, or a sousaphone squash. Anyway, but you can see that cuts off a little bit of that. So that's why I chose the asymmetrical framing for this shot. Now here is that as an anaglyph with the asymmetrical framing, the black bar method. And you might guess that in this case, the alternative, the stretch method, is not great, right? Partially because it's a large asymmetry in this particular picture, but also because of course, humans and their images do not suffer being stretched gladly, as one might say. Okay. Here is a slightly asymmetrical framing using the black bar method. It's very slight here, so the left edge is a little bit closer. But of course, in this picture, what's more obvious because of the vertical tilt is the window violations at the bottom corners. Now you could hide those actually if you sculpted the sides like this. So this is harder to do, and it's more manual labor than a simple cropping, but it's a nice effect. You could also apply the stretch method here if you wanted to purposefully bring the right and left edges to the same level. And that looks like this. It's a very small change, so here goes. There, that's all. That's a subtle difference for the overall picture, but if you zoom in, that difference of doing the stretch is actually very noticeable. So here is zoomed into the original. And now here's with and you can see the left is obviously significantly closer than the right here. And here's with the stretch. So you can see zoomed in, it's much more noticeable that this is, more aligned than the previous. All right. And again, you might prefer that in certain cases. So here now is an example combining that left and right edge asymmetry with the diagonal sculpting. And again, I just chose this because it fits the picture well, but it was obviously a little more work involved to do that. As a final example, I wanted to look at this shot. So this is slightly asymmetrical, but so what I liked about this originally was that, there's this backward tilt to the tree. But let's say for some reason I wanted the same picture, but I wanted the tree to kind of lie flatter. So it turns out that you can use some of the same and related techniques that I've just talked about to do that. So first you could stretch, again, the narrower image to equilibrate the left and right edges like this. Again, a kind of a small difference here. But now the larger question would be, how can you tilt the bottom of the trunk back into the picture? So if you look at this without your glasses a second, you can see that what you effectively want is to bring the red and cyan images at the bottom of the picture closer together to reduce the parallax there. So you could do this by skewing both images, in other words, just moving the bottom of the images closer together to meet in between. But in this case, since the tree is already leaning to one side, you could just change instead the red image only, the left eye image, which is this one. So now this is 2D, this is just the left eye image. So if you apply a skew to this, which is sometimes also called a shear, right, just a type of image distortion, and many graphics programs can do this, then you could change this image to this one. So this is similar, but not the same as rotating. Again, here's the original, and here's with the skew. So what this is if you imagine you have a pile of books on the floor and you pushed the top books on the stack to the left, that's what this skew is. So if you apply this to the anaglyph, then you would change the anaglyph from this to this now. So you can see that the top and bottom are now approximately level, but there's a problem now with the upper right corner having come forward a little bit. So what you could do is on the right edge here, if you crop that edge so it's aligned with that upper right corner, and then reapply that stretch method, again, to realign the right and left edges, you would get this. And as you can see, this is much flatter than the original. Again, here's the original. and this flattened version, if for some reason that's what you wanted again. So I have one bonus slide, but that's basically it. So, you know, even though this type of asymmetrical framing is somewhat out of bounds of traditional stereography, you can certainly make, you know, asymmetrical stereo pairs like this and you can make them compatible with even anaglyph and other formats. And you can also use some of the same techniques, you know, in more advanced ways to really reshape some of your stereos. So as a little bonus, this like hinges on a little riddle, and that's basically, when can you see something in 3D only when you're not wearing your anaglyph glasses, and then see it in 2D if you have your 3D glasses on. So to answer that, bear with me a second. So please take off your anaglyph glasses. Okay, so no glasses, and okay, and you do need to be able to free view for this. So if you free view this picture, of course, in parallel on top, cross on bottom, you will see it indeed in 3D, but with a little bit of ghosting. But so if you view it and you keep the image fused in 3D, but then slowly lower your glasses while keeping the image fused, you'll see that actually the glasses removes the 3D effect in this case. It's because the cross eye or the parallel eye and the anaglyph effectively cancel each other out. So I thought this was a weird little curiosity. It's like a paradox of the 3D glasses taking away the 3D-ness of an image. But there you have it.
Now we have some images to show.
This is a photo I took at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntington, in Huntsville. And this is the J2, which is what they call the first true space rocket engine. It was the largest liquid hydrogen fueled rocket engine made at the time. And 5 of these were basically part of the Saturn V rocket. Now this is an interesting bit of a sculpture from an artist called Calamity, who calls himself a mecha designer, sculptor, and illustrator, and basically he posts sometimes these turntable videos of his sculptures, and in this case he calls this the Sake robot, and there's one more shot of this too.
Did he do this in anaglyph, or did you catch it on the? How'd you get this?
Yeah, so basically he just posted a 2D turntable video, but basically for these images, I extracted still images and edited them slightly to correct some of the distortion from the rotation, but basically made 3D stereo pairs from this.
Well, thank you, because that is, in a previous episode, that's what Max Clark explained, and how he got the coronavirus to be in stereo. But I had to make sure you got that in, you know?
Yep, thanks.
Well, thank you. Thank you once again. Our next guest is David Heiser, who started with shooting 3D in Cha-Cha, which is basically moving the camera from left to right or right to left, depending upon your preference. But nonetheless, it simulates having 2 cameras. Of course, you can't do it. Moving things gets to be a problem. Artistically, it's cool, but the picture has some drawbacks to moving objects, that's for sure. He's a retired Python programmer, which sounds dangerous, and he has built really interesting stuff. He has built some interesting cameras, which you'll see at the end of this. Unbelievably clever. He's blown my mind. Where are you actually right now?
Menifee, California.
Thanks for joining us for your lunch. And now I'm going to hand everyone over to these delightful images from David Heiser.
The first one was taken at the Southern, let's see what it was called, the Southern California Railway Museum. And I love this thing. It's a real massive steamroller kind of thing. Buffalo Springfield, which I thought was a nice name. And I love color and shape. I was an amateur photographer before I started doing 3D, and I like abstract and color and shape stuff. This is in Escondido. There's a car show there every Friday night, and it's a great car show. It's worth the trip if you can make it. And they have different themes on different weeks. Every week is a different theme. Sometimes it's fire engines, or Model Ts or axle draggers. But there's some regulars that are there every week, and this is one of them. The thing I like about 3D is I take a lot of the same kind of pictures now with color and shape, but this gives me another dimension, so to speak. There's a museum in Vista, California, called the Craftsmanship Museum, and everything is miniature, and they're all built. Everything is tiny, and everything runs, everything works, and it's just amazing. This again is in Escondido. This is on fire truck night. And that's my camera. I call it Smiley. It's got 2 Raspberry Pi computers in it, and it's got 2 cameras, one attached to each computer, which you can see poking out through the holes there.
That is fantastic. I didn't put up all the internal workings because I thought that was just extra detail. It didn't add anything, but this is beautiful. This is excellent. I'm thoroughly impressed. How wide are those lenses spaced, in other words?
It's about the same as my own eyes. I figured that'd be good enough. So it's a little more than 2.5 inches, I think. I just measured my interocular distance and made it, just did that.
Excellent. Oh.
This is actually the 5th camera in the series that I've made. Started off making a pretty large one with larger computers, and finally ended up with this miniaturized version. And somewhere along the way, I made a macro camera that worked pretty well, and now I'm going to make another one that hopefully will be better.
You got an interesting question, if you don't mind me interjecting. Why was it necessary to have 2 Raspberry Pis? Can one not control two cameras?
Well, the answer is a little complicated because I'm going to lie to you right now, but it used to be true that you needed two computers, one for each camera. But that's changed recently, and now there's devices you can get where you can attach 2 cameras to one computer. It makes things much better.
Thank you so much again for that. That was really fascinating. Our next presenter and guest is Jim McManus. He's been a stereographer and NYSA member for 25 years and designed his own 3D camera rigs. Once you do it enough, you realize you have to get in there, and they don't make it. You just got to do it yourself. You can see his work on a permanent display up at the Cave of the Winds at Niagara Falls State Park. He's getting involved in tools and techniques for capturing virtual reality, which is one of our future presentations. We're also figuring out how to obtain better depth maps from ordinary stereo photos so that these images can be viewed in exciting new ways.
First of all, I'd like to say hi to everybody, and also to my friends in New York. Thank you again for hosting what is quickly becoming probably an international meeting. So I think it's great that everybody can come together at this particular venue and any meetings like it. So thanks again for having me. If you guys can view anaglyphs, he's taken the trouble to avoid the headaches by using a Dubois method. So I recommend anaglyphs because they're 3 times as large as what you can free view on the bottom. So first of all, here I have a train. It was quite a surprise. I was up in a tiny town in Alaska, and as I'm walking by this display of old railroad items, they had this train. I call this crazy train. You could also call it the real Snowpiercer, because literally this thing would be pushed by an engine, which is on the back of this little assembly, and it would chew through snow that had built up on the tracks. So I can just imagine, you see this thing coming at you, you definitely get out of the way. But hopefully you get out of the way with any train. Let that be my piece of advice for the day. But anyway, that's, okay. Now, being down here in Florida, I get a chance to, and being a sound man for news and television, I get a chance to see some interesting things up close. So I've done a number of jobs out at NASA, Cape Canaveral, and this particular day was a launch for the United Launch Alliance, and they were sending an Atlas V rocket up, and we got close. Now, obviously, we didn't stay this close for the when they actually sent it up. We would have been crispy critters at that point. But we got close during the day of the launch, got to interview all the key players, and it was just an exciting. Anytime I do a job out at the Cape, I mean, I would almost work it for free just to be near, pieces of history. And I've certainly seen a lot of it. That's my friend Victor on camera. I'm standing behind him. I'm wearing my sound harness. So it was a nice sunny day. This is actually the control center for the Atlas launches. It looks quite a bit different from if you see old pictures of the old mission control where, back in the 60s, they would have like a giant, ashtray full of butts next to every computer. And you're just like, oh my gosh, how do they still function? Everything's bright and crisp and clean here and modernized. And so this is just one of many launch facilities that ULA had. And of course, now there's SpaceX doing their own thing too. So between NASA, SpaceX, and ULA, there's actually quite a bit of activity after they ended the shuttle program back in 2012. All right, now, coincidentally, 2012, we jump back. When I went out to the Irvine, California NSA convention and went out to the Queen Mary, which they have on display. And Queen Mary is beautiful, gorgeous. I recommend everybody tour it. But more interestingly, in a tight space for 3D photos, at least, right next to it is the old Russian submarine, the Scorpion. And there's just like here, you see a forest of valves and dials and buttons, and you're just like, oh my gosh, how do those guys think, in the dark when the explosion's possibly going off all around them? So it was just a feast for 3D photography. Everywhere you turned, a submarine, because of its tight quarters, there's 3D above you and next to you and beneath you and everything. So this in particular was fascinating. Here's the torpedo room on the business end of the submarine. And you can actually see a torpedo loaded in the tube, just visible at the bottom of the picture with some fins on the back of it. But they had the top one empty and a light shining down it so you could see the depth. And I think those things are 8 feet long or maybe even a little bit longer, but they're massive. And they had those hanging overhead. Sometimes in the bunks, you would have like sailors sleeping beneath spare torpedoes. Crazy, crazy stuff, and a lifestyle I certainly can't imagine. But again, just everywhere you look, there's detail. One of my more interesting gigs out at NASA was the return to space of Space Shuttle Discovery back in 2005. It had been locked up in a building for 2 years after the Columbia disaster, and we went out to film it returning, actually rolling out of the building all the way out to the pad, which is only a 2-mile trip, but because it goes a quarter mile an hour, it was about an 8-hour, it was a full day. It was a full day following that thing along. So if you notice, this thing is hyper, but I didn't shoot it as such. I only had my cell phone with me on this day. So I got a nice shot of it, and I waited for it to create the displacement because it moved so slow, and I was able to get a series of nice hypers. The only thing you would never know just from looking at this is down at the bottom, I had to fudge the photo a little bit because there was a pickup truck in the way, so I got it out of there and repaired it a little bit. And yeah, just to speak of the machinery, I noticed Jim Harp saying, now that's a machine. Not only is the shuttle impressive, but the crawler, they call it, the mobile launch platform on the bottom that it's riding on, that thing is a beast. It can generate 16 million pounds of horsepower, which, I mean, if you can just imagine, and each of those treads, it has 8 treads on it. Each tread has, I think, 56 links on it, and each link weighs 1.5 tons. So it just pulverizes the gravel road as it goes down the road. It just pulverizes it to dust. So that was a real thrilling day, just being able to follow that thing right next to it all the way out to the pad. So I really appreciate you guys letting me show you some of these. And I forget if there's any more. I've lost count already.
No, I think that was it.
Okay. I like the canned applause.
No, actually, I have a house full of people there. Uh-oh.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, right.
Boy, they react right on cue.
Yeah, that's it. Well, you just throw them a raisinette and they go crazy. Well, listen, thank you once again. We're looking forward to seeing you again in a few weeks. We really appreciate it.
All right, I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll head on to the next. You'll just have to have patience with me for one moment.
See you, Jim.
Thank you, everybody. I'll see you later.
Our next guest, Robert Swarthe, and an NYSA member, might I add. 2-time Oscar nominee, first for his own animated short, second as co-nominee for visual effects for Star Trek The Motion Picture, directed commercials, made many short films, a lifelong love of 3D, as you just heard, member of, just happily retired in New York with his lovely wife, Kathy. Take it away, my dear friend, Robert.
The Disney Family Museum, which is located in San Francisco, California, is a wonderful museum, which as soon as you can travel to San Francisco, you should go see it. The 2 cameras that I photographed there were, the one you're looking at now is the Circorama camera. It's 11 16mm cameras arranged in a circle. And if you can, this is the patent for it. And you can, when you're in the theater, I don't know if you can see this, but in the theater, you're standing below the screen, and it's a big circular screen, and there's 11 projectors all projecting. You can see that there's black borders between each of the 11 screens, and in that black border is where the hole is for the projector lens to come through. Now this was done in 16mm. They did it again in 35mm. There's a lot about this on the internet. If you really want to know more about it. And now, of course, they're doing it digitally, and well, you know this. But this is all 16 millimeter motion picture film, and this is sitting there at the Disney Family Museum for all to see. You can go on to the next one. Okay, now this is the multiplane animation camera that the Disney Studios created in 1937. And there are 3 of these huge animation cameras left in existence. And this one is at the Disney Family Museum. Now, if you look at the very top of the picture, above the camera, you see it's kind of a dark area, because this thing is so tall that it goes through to the 2nd floor of the museum. And you'll see a picture I took from the 2nd floor looking down at it a little later. But next, you can go to the next one, John. Now, yeah, this is the view looking down through the ceiling. I gotta put my glasses on for this one. So there's a camera operator up there with, you can see the magazines there for the motion picture camera. And they took 4 men to operate this. 1 man up there at the camera, and then let me see. Here, if you look at the picture with me, this is the schematic of the camera. So there's the operator is up there, and then they have 1, 2, 3, 4 planes with artwork on each one, and they can all these planes can move up and down and left and right. Next slide. Now that's the.
Well, you're the I even like the way you set up. You got that little room to the left. Boy, you're a director. Action.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Anyway, but so this picture shows the bottom, which is the background, and that looks like it's a background that was painted for the movie Bambi, and then the next level up where you see that near that's where the animation drawings of it could be Bambi or the whatever it is, the whatever characters are in there, and they can all move independently. Now on the internet, you can go to if you type in Disney multiplane camera, it's easy to find websites all over the place where you see about a 4-minute video of Walt Disney himself talking about the multiplane camera and showing it how it works, and even showing you a scene from Bambi, which really shows off the process. Now the thing is, they did this. Okay, and there's the camera. That's a different view of the same camera, I guess. Yes. So the camera, see that ring? The camera could rotate. Anyway, when I was working on Close Encounters of the Third Kind, my animation cameraman was this wonderful old guy named Max Morgan, who was past retirement age, but he didn't want to stop working. He was one of the original multiplane cameramen at Disney. He photographed the Old Mill, which was the first Disney film to use the multiplane camera in 1937. He worked on Snow White. He worked on, Pinocchio, Bambi, Fantasia, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Just this incredible guy. But this camera with 4 different operators, all turning all these cranks to move things left, right, up, down, rotation, times 4. It's just incredibly difficult. Apparently, there's one shot at the beginning of Pinocchio where the camera goes through the village to end up at Geppetto's workshop, and it took them so long to shoot it, and it cost so much that even Walt said, "Well, we got to kind of maybe back off a little bit on this."
But that was great hearing everything from a love.
Oh, wait a minute, there's one more thing. Right?
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
I'm going to mute myself.
What are you, Columbo? Okay. Well, thank you very much, man. Thank you. Always a pleasure hearing stories from you, Robert. Without further ado, see Susan Pinsky. She's been involved in 3D photography since the mid-'70s. She and David purchased some Viewmaster reels at a garage sale. She's been a member of the Stereo Club of Southern California, now the LA 3D Club since 1977, a past president of that club, and been attending National Stereoscopic Association's convention since 1984. And she's working on a really great project, 3D Legends, a tribute to the people who are no longer with us who have contributed to the field of stereoscopy.
Hi, everybody. So this picture is of the MD aluminum stereo slide mount machinery that, remember analog and film and mounting your slides, not digital? Well, MD made these wonderful aluminum mounts, and this is one of their machines. So there's the strip of aluminum going into the machine, and they had to put it through a greasing machine to get it greased up to go through the machine. There's a roll of aluminum, very thin aluminum, and then it would come flying out into these baskets, and they'd have to put these baskets into the degreasing machine. So you have to have this oily, greasy smell to go with these slides. Then they did that in the degreasing machine. And
an MD mounted slide.
Oh, excellent. You know, you got to come in. You got to.
I love the sound effect.
That came from my heart to you guys because you're just so wonderful.
Well, thank you.
Okay, for our next one is the next one up is David Starkman, along with Susan. Been selling 3D supplies, as I said before, to 3D photographers and enthusiasts from 78 to 2005. He's past president of the Stereo Club of Southern California, now the LA 3D Club, and has been a member of that club since 1977. He's contributing editor to the National Stereoscopic Association's Stereo World magazine, and he's currently doing what he can to help Susan along with this labor of love, the 3D legends. Without further ado.
Your brain.
Well,
without further ado, David Starkman. Thank you.
Well, when you asked for 5 images, I've thought of this a little more like in our slide competitions. So I was looking for a machine and I wanted it to be more interesting. And I was just playing around with some special effects. So the machine you're looking at.
Well, you succeeded. It's definitely interesting. Yes, please.
Well, at any rate, if you look beyond the way it's been broken up into a lot of pieces, the machine itself was at the former Bonnet lab, which was where the equipment that Maurice Bonnet, who made lenticular images back in the 1940s. He made cameras and made the most beautiful lenticular quality images you've ever seen. And all of his equipment ended up at a Center for Scientific Research in Paris. Go back a second.
No.
All right.
No.
Anyway, that was at the Bonnet lab. All right.
No,
I just want to say what it is. So this was the lathe machine that made the masters for the lenticular screens that they pressed out there.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay, next.
Excellent,
So machine, I figured a car is a machine, and this was one I took at a car show. Here we have a Culver City car show every year, and this was at the show.
Well, it's quite beautiful. It's kind of dreamlike what you've got there.
Playing it with special effects a bit, and the filter, the program. This was not with Photoshop. This is in
ACD.
It's called a program called ACDC, and I forget exactly which special effect this is called.
Dramatic.
All right, Susan says it's called Dramatic, and you play with that and some color, and it's more interesting.
Okay.
So go to the next.
What are you shooting? What did you shoot that with, by the way?
Oh, that was probably my main cameras have been a Sony P200s, a twin set that was made by Jacob Van Ackeren from about 2005. And also I used the Fuji W3. And this was one or the other. I can't tell you which. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, not at all. Thank you.
Okay. This was back to the space shuttle. This is obviously not the real shuttle. This was a miniature model. One of our customers was a company called Brick Price Model Shop, and they made both miniature models, which this was, and they also made full-size mock-ups. They also had a full-size mock-up of the space shuttle that I guess was going to be used in a movie. And I took this I do remember was taken with a Bush Variscope. That's how far back this went.
Wow.
So, next. Again, this was probably taken with a Fuji, and this was at a train museum in England. I forget which museum and which town, but it's a pretty vintage locomotive, and some of the train fans might know what it is, but again, I played with the dramatic special effects on it. No snow removal on this one, Ron.
Stand by.
Okay. And this was at one of the NSA conventions. And again, trains are always a fun and machine-like subject. And again, I used some dramatic special effects to enhance this photo, which was probably taken with the twin Sony rig, Sony P200s.
Wow.